I'm Julie Zuckerman from Xyte. Welcome to this webinar, Disrupting Device Manufacturers. In a minute, I'm going to hand it over to Omer Brookstein and Roy Barkat, who will introduce themselves. If you have any technical problems, you can put that in the chat to me. If you have questions along the way, put that in the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screens. That's it. This webinar is being recorded, so if you missed part of it, you want to share with your colleagues, we'll be sending that out to everyone tomorrow. Omer, take it away.
Thank you so much, Julie. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. It's absolutely a pleasure having you all with us today. And Roy, first of all, thank you so much for taking the time and joining us today. We've been working together for quite some time, but it's a great pleasure having you here in the webinar today.
Thanks for having me.
So we have quite a lot to cover, and I'm actually very excited for this conversation. But I guess before we start, I imagine that most of our audience is less familiar with the venture capital industry, and while very familiar probably with Intel, might be less familiar with Intel Capital, the venture arm of, or the investment arm of Intel. So I think it'd be great if you can start with a quick introduction about yourself, about Intel Capital, and kind of the main areas you're looking at.
Sure, with pleasure. So again, thanks for having me on the webinar. Very briefly on Intel Capital, and you need to make sure that I don't miss anything. Intel Capital is, like you said, Intel's corporate venture arm. We've been around for over 30 years now. We're not a strategic investor in the sense that we don't necessarily invest for our business units, but rather we work very much like any financial VC. We go look for the best financial venture opportunities out there, the best startups out there, in 4 domains that we focus on. Those are cloud, silicon, device, and frontier. We can talk a little bit about what each one of those are. But essentially, we invest in early stage startups across the world and across those various domains. We've been doing this for, like I said, over 30 years, and we deploy between $400 and $500 million every year. Today, we have 250 almost portfolio companies, and I'm happy to be on this webinar with one of my personal favorites, Xyte.
Thank you. That's wonderful. And how many years have you been in the business, and specifically with Intel Capital?
I would be revealing my age. So I've been in venture for about 15 years, and I joined Intel Capital. I'm now one of the managing directors in our fund about 5.5 years ago. Before that,
Wonderful.
I worked with a public holding company in the US that maybe some of the callers may know, a company called Liberty Media. They own very big companies like TripAdvisor and Formula One and all those, and we did venture. So that's my venture history.
Wonderful. We'll speak some more about venture and what you and what Intel Capital find in Xyte in general. But I got to tell you, one first thing is, first of all, I feel very fortunate for us to partner with Intel Capital and personally with you. And I think one of the biggest challenges from Xyte, for those in the audience that are familiar with us, is that we often don't fall in any of the buckets of typical VCs. We're not a cybersecurity, we're not an AI company. We're a different kind of creature. And it was very, enlightening for me in the work with Intel Capital is that you and the team were able to look beyond those buckets and still understand the value in Xyte, the value position to our customers, and the opportunity that we all see in Xyte. But we'll get to that, in a couple of minutes. I think there's going to be a very interesting conversation. Maybe a quick introduction of Xyte and myself for those in the audience that are not familiar with Xyte. So first of all, my name is Omer. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Xyte. And what Xyte is really the first cloud platform purposely designed, purposely built for device and hardware manufacturers to manage their connected device business end to end, from the second they connect the devices to the cloud all the way to adding subscription component to their devices. That's going to be the major topic of our conversation today. And following this short introduction, I think we have a lot to cover today. We'll try to keep it short, But I was very much looking forward for this conversation because as we usually operate in the day to day, helping more manufacturers to realize the power of the cloud and the opportunities for them in the cloud, and we'll get to some examples later to make it very tangible. But I really do think it's a very unique opportunity to speak with you, Ray, today. And for those of us once again not familiar with the VC perspective, get into the mind of an investor and hear from you how you look at the opportunity, what you found in Xyte that made you lead the last funding round of Xyte. And I'm guessing here, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think when you look at an opportunity like Xyte, you're looking for something that is applicable today, but also for something that will make a huge impact in the future. And that's probably the most challenging thing about being an investor, trying to vision what the future will be like. So, and then we can maybe discuss specifically about Xyte, but how about we just start with that generally what you saw in Xyte when we first met some time ago?
Perfect. So you said before in the intro that a lot of investors invest in specific buckets. You mentioned cybersecurity, and there's cloud, and there are various domains, and you're right. But for me, Xyte does fall into a certain bucket, and I'll tell you what it is. It's the disruptor bucket, right? For me, Xyte is and there's a very big difference, by the way, between a solution like Xyte, which stands to potentially disrupt a huge market, right? All the device and hardware manufacturers, versus the more crowded spaces, right? Cyber being one of them. Cyber is huge and it's very successful, and there are a lot of benefits to that. But what excited me about Xyte was that I've been seeing this trend of, we've all been seeing this trend of companies moving. It started with software, right? Software companies moving to this new exciting business model called SaaS, right? Software as a service. And in my mind, the shift for device and hardware manufacturers to these new business models is trivial. Like it's going to happen. The question is just when, how, but the end goal, the end sort of stage is clear to me. And I think Xyte is building itself as the disruptor in that regards.
Well, I'm biased, right? But I couldn't agree more.
Mm-hmm.
But why do you think that is trivial or inevitable? Why do you think that shift? Because some people might say, we've been doing that. We've been running our business like that for the last 30, 40 years. Why do we need to change? It's pretty successful for us so far. We'll just continue doing what we did, last week and 2 weeks ago and 2 months ago.
I think it's a combination of, in certain ways, they have no choice, or they will not have a choice. But there are also a lot of benefits. There are benefits for them and their users. You and I, when we conducted the diligence process in Xyte, and we had hours and hours of conversations, I remember to this day, one of the examples that you had given me was around email servers, right?
Mm-hmm.
We all, I don't know who dialed in, but I know a lot of people remember we used to have these email exchange servers in our offices, right? So that we can send and receive emails. No one has that today, and no one really cares, right? I want the service. I want to be able to send you an email, receive an email. I don't care about the email server. And the same goes to pretty much, no offense to anyone in the room, the same goes to any piece of hardware or device that is out there, right? If it's a car, most people don't care about the car. I want to get from point A to point B, and I want to enjoy the ride and all that, but I want the service. Same goes for audio video, right? I want you and I to have video conferencing in our campuses, in our offices. Do I really care or understand what's behind the hood or beneath the hood, what's behind the plastic or metal? I don't. I want to get the service. And so I touched on one point in the sense that the device manufacturers and hardware manufacturers won't have a choice, in the sense that me as the consumer or the buyer I'm going to insist on this, right? So I think the customers are going to ask for this. The second part where I mentioned that there's benefits to the manufacturers is a bunch, and we can talk about this for hours. I'm just going to say one thing, and I'm sure you're going to touch on all these later on. But one of the examples is it doesn't make sense in my mind for a device manufacturer to sell a box, whatever it may be, for $1,000, for $10,000 to a customer that he doesn't really know. And hopefully, maybe he'll come back in 3, 4, 5 years. But I don't know. The alternative that Xyte can support is you get to know your customer, you know who it is, and you have that ongoing relationship. And I can monetize. I'll let you continue.
We'll get to all of that because yeah, you're kind of covering my part of the deal. But I think in other words, what you're saying is that people want to move from buying products to buying outcomes, right? And I want to buy the service that the device enabled me to do, like you said, without being worried or being busy with how it's being operated behind the scenes. And I actually have a very good example just for that later on, as we'll talk about. So once again, some more tangible examples. And when I started the company, I used to work for a relatively large device manufacturer, a US-based company. And what was very clear for me at the time was that there's a very strong financial force, and these device manufacturers must really change their business because in most cases, devices are being commoditized, right? It's not as it used to be 20 years ago, and margins are, prices are going down and margins are shrinking. So, and we hear that constantly from more and more device manufacturers in the audio video industry where we started, but also, in the PC industry and other industries, where they simply have to find new ways to make revenue and hopefully recurring and predictable revenue streams from their devices. And that really happens across any industry. So we kind of talked about that, but I'd love to hear your thoughts about, what do you think about moving once again from product selling to outcome? What's the future of these device manufacturers? As an investor, what do you think the impact is on the company's valuation? Will you even consider, from Intel Capital to invest in a company that does not have that kind of business model? And once again, from even like a Silicon Valley investors, how do you see a company that sells one-time product versus companies that move to subscriptions?
So obviously, it still happens, right? There are still startups that have physical products and they sell them, as sort of one-time fees or one-time purchase. We are seeing less and less of those. One reason is, there's that statement, software. How does it go? Software ate the world, or software is everywhere, and SaaS is a de facto reality for any software company, and for good reason, because, and you said it yourself, there's predictability, there's ongoing revenues, it's not as lumpy. You get to have visibility not only into forecasting your revenues, but also understanding your customer base. You have these touch points with your customers. And, in venture capital, we're very, very data driven. We're very, very much data oriented. And so are our companies, our portfolio companies, all the startups. I don't know, there's maybe a chicken and egg thing, but the reality is both investors and startups are very, very data oriented. And if you sell a product to someone that you don't really know who it is, you don't have visibility into usage, you don't have visibility into how well your product is performing. Are they enjoying the features that you had released, or maybe not? And what happens if you sold a product, then you came out with a new feature? Can you push that feature into your customer base to increase experience and maybe also to monetize? By the way, it's not all monetization, right? It's also enabling a better user experience for your customer base. And then they become more loyal, and then you get more money. But so yes, the answer is more and more companies go towards subscription-based models.
Well, absolutely. And I got two comments on that. The first one is, we just got back from InfoComm. That's a large trade show in Las Vegas about a month ago and 6 weeks ago. And we started talking to product people now, and we see that, by the way, we see a generation change within this organization, all the way from the executive teams being changed, and the new executive teams come and say, hey, we need to move to subscriptions. But even from the product people, they came to us and say, well, we're making those products, but we kind of building them in the dark. We have no knowledge on how our customers are using them. Are they failing in the field? Is the recent firmware is working as expected, and so on? And one of the biggest, I would even say the simplest value that Xyte offer this product team is to collect data, anonymized data from these devices to see trends and understand how the devices are being used. And the other thing, I recall to date a very first meeting some time ago when we went to the call, and once again I talk to investors all the time, but you saw the bigger picture, and you saw about the way to now, if I collect data, how do I better market to my customers, how do I better segment my customers, and all those new great things. And very honestly, it was very far in our roadmap at the time. Those are things that we have added and still have a lot of work to add to our platform. But I think you and the team could see the opportunity in Xyte and build that full stack solution and solve so many pain points for these device manufacturers. We'll talk about the value chain visibility and the sustainable customer relationship in just a second, that are not just the subscription. The subscription is almost like the ultimate outcome, but there's so many other building blocks in the way that we kind of have to address for those device manufacturers. So, well, first of all, thank you for that. Once again, I think most of the audience is less familiar with the way investors are looking at challenges like Xyte and companies like Xyte, and more product people. So we talked about that for a moment, but now I think let's be more tangible. And I suggest, and here's the images that I forgot to click, but I suggest that we'll kind of flip the conversation, right? And passing the interviewer hat to you as well, Roy. But when you and I discussed before the webinar, is like, okay, so we kind of discussed it now as well, but what's in it for the OEM? So what kind of what kind of opportunities and what kind of pain points can cloud technologies and solutions such as Xyte can solve for device manufacturers? So the first one for me, and you only briefly touched it, but I think that's the value chain visibility. Because when you think about every SaaS company, and you gave Exchange as an example, and Office 365, the biggest thing that SaaS companies, or the most valuable thing that SaaS companies have, is not the subscription business model or the recurring revenue. To me, that's an outcome. But the first thing and the most valuable thing that they have is that they know their end customers. They understand how they're using the platform. And when you know who's the end customer, then you can upsell and post-sell more features and capabilities to that specific end customer. And the reality is that, and we see that change, is that device manufacturers today, especially B2B device manufacturers, they're usually selling through distributors, value-added resellers, system integrators, and so on. And the second their devices leave their warehouse, they have zero visibility. They have no idea where the device is landed, who's using them, how they're using them. And when you don't know the customer, the end customer, there's absolutely no way that you can develop any kind of recurring revenue. And what we see now with some of our customers is that for the first time, and you could see that it blows their mind, for the first time, they understand who are the people using the devices. And they can start offering them better services, better support, better, more valuable product, and so on. And I always say this is, to me, the very, very, very core value proposition of Xyte. Everything we build on top of that, everything we build on top of that. And the best example I keep giving is that when I bought my iPhone a couple of years ago, I was told it's coming from the Chinese distributor. But when I thought about it for a second, I realized that I couldn't care less. And more importantly, Apple could not care less, because I put my iCloud account on it, and everything I buy from or through Apple, and they have full visibility to how I use my device. And that's the kind of visibility that we would like to give as Xyte to every device manufacturer out there. Any comments on that?
There's another layer that you may want, that I think is interesting, that Xyte offers, or provides value in the context of what you had said around the value chain, which is, I love the way that the platform enables this sort of collaborative situation, right? So it's not only the manufacturer and the end user that are now connected, and there's this visibility and relationship, but the value chain, the players in between also benefit, I think, from Xyte. And then there's a whole network effect as well, which I don't know if you want to expand on, but I think the fact that the multiple players that are involved are benefiting from Xyte is also very, very meaningful.
I 100% agree. And the device manufacturers we work with, they get it. And one of the biggest reasons for them to opt into Xyte and not just develop their own cloud solution in some cases is what they call empower our channel partners or empower our system integrators. And I'm often being asked, well, what's going to happen with all the system integrators? And my answer is that they have a very, very important role in that, because when you look at what happened in the software world, it's hard to believe it, but 10, 12 years ago, we all used to go to the store down the street and buy Adobe or Microsoft Office on a CD and take it back home. And those stores either went out of business or changed their business to be Office 365 or G Suite support and implementation companies. And in a very similar way, for these device manufacturers, their channels, they're super valuable, but they need to get the tools to move into to this generation of subscription in cloud. And device manufacturers working with Xyte invite, as you said before, in a collaborative way to a collaborative platform, their system integrator, their channel partners, and equipping them with the right tools to offer managed services to the end customers, and actually starting to develop their own recurring revenue and their own subscription business models on top of that. And we have a few examples of device manufacturers and their channel partners doing that already today. And I think that is the future for them as well. I completely agree. It's a value chain solution.
It's a win-win-win for the manufacturer,
Yep.
for the system integrators, for the end user, which is really important. So let's dive into maybe some specifics, some real world. So we talked about the software as a service because that exists. That's sort of, we all know from home, from work. Let's talk about some of the examples maybe from hardware and device manufacturers, some real world examples.
Absolutely. So there are a few great examples. I think the first one is one of our early customers. It's an audio company, and the reason why I really like to use that as a great example is because this company is really taking or making the most out of Xyte. The first step was connecting the device to the cloud and offer a much better, like we mentioned before, a way for their end customers to remotely deploy, manage, monitor, configure their devices. This was step one. The second step, as we just discussed, was to bring their system integrators and their value-added resellers to the platform and better service their customers. But I was really, really excited about Symmetric specifically about a month and a half ago, when they, for the first time, announced their commerce aspect of their cloud platform based on Xyte as well, starting selling premium device features for the devices after the device has been installed in the field. And this is absolutely, I think, amazing. We'll have another example, maybe more similar to Tesla, but I got to use that as an example as well. We all familiar, or many of us familiar with the Tesla full self-driving. That's an aftermarket sale. You buy the car, and if you choose to, you can buy or subscribe to that feature. And what that enables, like we said before, it's a win-win-win to everybody. It's a win for the end customer because they don't have to commit to buy a feature that in many cases in the design process, they don't know yet if they need it or not, and they can subscribe to it or buy it later on. It's a great win for the device manufacturer as well, because instead of having multiple SKUs, multiple part numbers with or without the features or different configuration, they can limit the number of SKUs, dramatically simplify their inventory, especially across different geographics and so on, and sell the same SKU to all the different customers, but let them choose if they wish to upgrade or add the premium feature following that. So I think that is a great example, and they're really making the most out of Xyte.
Yeah, it seems like significantly less headache, significantly less overhead. When you can sell one SKU, one device, and then you can toggle on and off. The end user or the system integrator in between can toggle on and off different premium features. The manufacturer can start extracting more money out of these. The user can get more benefits, or maybe they can tone it down depending on whatever they need, right?
Yep.
Basic.
Absolutely. And another great example is actually from the automotive market. And once again, we are all very much familiar with Tesla being the first software-driven car, right? And opening premium feature or even buying complimentary service. This customer of us is using Xyte to penetrate new price-sensitive industries or markets. So in many cases, your device is a premium device, is an expensive device, and there are some set of customers that cannot afford to buy this device with one-time capital expense. However, by pricing the device differently, in this case, the car differently, and by offering, by essentially believing in the longevity of a device and offering an OPEX version of your device completely makes it way more affordable for some of your customers, enabling you to be more competitive and penetrate new markets that before that were beyond reach for those premium brands.
So a couple of points that I want to make sure that we all do not miss in the flow of this conversation. One, just to make sure everyone realizes the end game of hardware as a service. It can be a difficult pill to swallow. It could be a big transition for some. This case where you actually sell your product as a service, usage-based, etc., is a very brave, amazing move. But you can do things that are easier for your organization to go through, right? You can sell remote support for your truck, remote service, whatever it may be, right? So that I think is an important point to mention. Do you want to expand on that before I touch on I wanted to touch on the OPEX, CAPEX thing from the customer's perspective. So maybe before that.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the greatest things about Xyte is that we really let the device manufacturer choose. And I completely agree with you. Moving all the way from one-time product sales all the way to hardware as a service is a very bold move. I'm going to show you another bold mover in a second, but I agree it's a very bold move. But there's a whole span in between, all the way from selling complementary. So how about we'll sell you the device in the same way we used to sell you, but we'll sell you an extended manufacturer warranty on top of that, or we'll sell you some, better service, some cloud service, and so on. And then the premium features that we've seen, we support both device premium features and cloud premium features. So, for example, remotely connected device using SSH tunneling, that is a premium feature some of our customers choose to sell for an extra charge. And then ultimately, you can make the move and move entirely to device as a service. And even then, you have different flavors. You decide to charge the customer a fixed fee amount for every month, plus a usage based on mileage, or plus a fixed. So there's all these different business models. And what Xyte really does incredibly is enable the device manufacturers to adjust and build the business model that fits their business, their customers, their market, and we support them with all the different business models.
And also their financial situation, right? Because I know that some of your customers are smaller, maybe, and cash flow is very, very important. So instead of selling a whole truck as a service, you can go through a process where you sell the truck, one-time fee, and then you can monetize those premium features, and you don't get that runway sort of dip, right?
Challenge.
I wanted to, you mentioned OPEX, and I think, again, it's not related to the trucks, but it does relate to the customers. And I think you touched on this before, but I want to make sure that everyone understands this. When we did our diligence on Xyte, we spoke to a lot of customers, various verticals and markets, etc. One of the things that we heard across the board was this pressure to reduce CapEx for various reasons. I'll give you one example. One of them was, we heard a story about a hospital, and after COVID, hospitals and the healthcare systems had spent a lot of money, and again, sort of runway and cash is an issue. And so for them to start to spend, let's say you have to sell audio video systems for an entire campus, for an entire hospital, for them to dish out $1 million check to buy audio video systems versus maybe pay $10,000 a month for a subscription for my entire campus. It's a different ballgame whatsoever. It's a different approval process. It's a different commitment. And so we heard across the board that customers are looking to shift to operating expenses instead of capital expenditure.
Absolutely. And I can tell you that from research that we've done, when you equip a new enterprise building, the second most expensive budget line after furniture is technology, right? So if I can move that, I don't know if you can do IKEA as a service, but if I can move that technology to something that will spend over 36 months or maybe 5 years, that is very, very significant. And then if I can downscale and upscale that based on my needs, so if I just hire 2 more, salespeople, or if I hire a new department and I can then scale that subscription, that's a huge value for me as the financial people in the company. And I would also share with you that one of the very early sales of Xyte was to a very large American enterprise. And even though they paid everything in cash, right? The fact that it was marked internally for them as OPEX, I always joke there was no CFO was harmed in the process because the entire approval process internally was so much quicker now that it's an OPEX budget versus a CAPEX budget. So that is huge for those end customers. And you and I had a discussion about about one of the largest building companies in a way in the world today and how they need to move to OPEX as well. And we have examples from the day-to-day of device manufacturers offering OPEX versus CAPEX of actually winning deals because they have this big advantage to their customers.
Yeah, for sure. Good. So I interrupted you. Where were we in the flow? I think you wanted to give maybe another example.
Yeah, so I think we have 2 more examples, right? And this one is really great. This is actually a B2C. You remember in the due diligence process, we really designed Xyte to be a B2B2B, right? We're a platform for B2B companies, businesses that sells to other businesses. And this company, which is a very well-known brand, they came to us and say, hey, we actually have a B2C. We want to sell that to our consumer customers as a subscription. And at the beginning, I got to say, we were a bit hesitant about that. But, it worked out very, very nicely. And what they do, they actually develop a smart home appliance, a thermostat. And they just kind of tried the water, right? They started offering that in their website as a one-time fee for a couple of hundreds of dollars or a subscription completely, by the way, once again, a bold move, completely device as a service for $10, $15, $20 a month that you can actually buy the entire device. And we manage everything behind the scenes for them, the license entitlement, the shipping and all of that, Xyte fully managed for them. But the reason why I brought up this example, and I think it's fascinating is that one of their concerns at the beginning was that offering the subscription business will actually cannibalize the one-time sales as well. Because if I can buy something for less capital expenses, we just discussed, I'm going to opt in for the subscription. And what they found out, and I think was fascinating, is that not only did not cannibalize their business, but in fact, it helped them penetrate new market segments. And what they found out is that the audience that used to buy the devices keeps buying them in the same way, while new, usually younger audience that are more accustomed to subscription and maybe don't have the capital, subscribe and prefer to get a device in a subscription rather than buy it for one time.
So I think this is a good example for, this is a B2C example, but I think everyone here in the webinar that is a B2B player has to realize you're in the same situation. I think the buyers and the users in your enterprise customers are expecting a certain user experience and just like they have at home, right? When they buy an iPhone or when they buy a security camera, whatever it may be, or if they have a Tesla, the expectation is a user experience that is, fully connected, cloudified, and all that. So we spoke a lot about the business models, the subscriptions and monetization, and all that is very, very important. But Xyte enables all these hardware and device manufacturers to provide a truly cloudified, if that's the right word, a cloudified experience for their customers. And their customers are not necessarily consumers, but they act as consumers. They have the same expectations. They want the same quality. They want to be able to have, visibility of all of the devices installed in my organization. I want to be able to see if there are any malfunctions. I want to service them, in a easy way, and all of that. And if you're not there, you have to use Xyte.
I agree. I think the lines between the consumer experience and the business experience kind of blurred, and people expect more, especially with the mobile phone and tablets, and making their way into the business world. People are expecting more kind of consumer grade experience, and they don't care it's a B2B solution. They still want to have a great experience. It should be slick and very, very easy to use. And quite frankly, this is one of our biggest challenges as well, making that a very complex and powerful B2B platform very, very easy to use. And by the way, what we hear a lot from our customers and our customers, when they talk about Xyte, it's a platform you want to live in, right? Because it's exactly what it is. It's cloud-based, it's SaaS-y, it's easy to use, it's very convenient and accessible from everywhere. And that's exactly what customers are expecting their device manufacturers to do now. And it's a huge challenge for these device manufacturers, and that's why they choose to work with us.
And if people haven't seen Xyte's platform, I would urge them to go online onto your website and see some of the screens, the user experience. It goes way, way beyond a business model.
Yep. Wait, there's one last example, and then I see we start getting some questions coming in. But we talked before about outcome, or selling outcome versus selling devices. And to me, digital signage is almost like the perfect example. And for those of the audience that are not familiar with what digital signage is, but digital signage is all the signage we see in enterprises, in higher education, in retail stores. Every Starbucks store you go to, there's a digital signage, right? And we work with some of the leading digital signage manufacturers today. And the reason why it makes to me such a great example is that when I buy a display, when I buy a digital signage player, I don't really want to buy the display. I don't want to buy the player, right? I want to subscribe for the service. I just want to get a signage. But it happens that I absolutely have to have a display. Otherwise, there's no way for you to display the information, right? So I have to buy it. And what we see is a shift in this industry, or in this market, of more and more digital signage players understanding that. And once again, the hardware is being commoditized. So it's less about the hardware. It would be very hard for me to sell you a better display because my 4K display is exactly like my competitor's 4K display. However, if I can bundle the hardware, the software, and the services for the content management and sell you a package where you as an enterprise IT or as a higher education university in the US, you don't care about the devices, and I'll swap the hardware for you whenever they fault and whatever. You just want to subscribe for the service, and you want to be sure that your players and your signage are running. That's a huge benefit to the end customers, and that's, to me, I think, just makes a perfect example for that product versus outcome-based sale.
For sure. It's I'll share with the audience. It's late where I'm at now. My wife texted me if I'm able to turn on the TV from my cell phone, right? So that connectivity, that user experience. If I'm sitting here and the head of IT in my organization needs to take, something drops and they need to reboot, they need to have remote connectivity. That's our expectation. Digital signage as well. Like you said, remotely connect, configure, and stream your messages. Seems to me like it's basic. If you don't have it,
yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, wonderful. So I think we kind of covered everything. I think, Julie, we have some questions coming in, so we'll be happy to address them.
Thanks, everyone, for your questions, and thanks, Roy and Omer. First question is, can you talk about the financing model from the side of the OEM adopting Xyte, of selling a service and not a product, how does the fact that they're selling a full product, that they are not selling a full product on day one, affect or show on their P&L?
Okay, that's a great question. I'm by no means an accountant, but I will say it very much differs on the company, the size of the company, if it's a traded company or a non-traded company. We do work with accountants on addressing those questions for our customers specifically. I would say that some of the traded companies do have a challenge with revenue recognition. However, it's the same process that happened with SaaS when many of those traded companies used to sell perpetual and now moving to subscription. So in very, very high level, what some cases they do, they kind of separate the actual hardware, the actual metal. Because, for example, when I buy an IP switch, what do I buy? How is the tax even calculated? Do I buy the metal or do I buy the firmware and the software making that switch actually operational, right? So in many cases, what they do, they're separating the components of the devices. Some of them is being recognized as revenue from the actual hardware, sometimes covered by a one-time fee. Some others is recognized as software, which is easier, but that has to do with regulation, and every country, every state is different. Every company consult with their accountants on finding the right solution. We give them, or we supply them the technology to once again keep track of all of that. I would expand. I think I'll shortly expand this question because some might be curious. Well, how these device manufacturers, and you touched it before, Ray, what do they do with that cash flow challenge? Because now I have to financially finance the bill of materials in many cases. So there are a few ways to do that. One of them is to charge an upfront fee for really just the cost of the bill of materials. And the others is we actually connect these device manufacturers with banks and lenders that enable them to help them with that challenge. In some cases, that's the reason why it's related to this question. In some cases, these lenders actually knows to buy the device in full and have them on their books, and then they solve the problem for the device manufacturers. But this is a complex, a complex question with a complex answer, and it's very much specific for each customer.
These banking partners you're referring to some big entities, and I can share that it was part of, it created some comfort, some confidence with us that Xyte was able to partner with these big financing entities that, if we could name them, I'm sure everyone in the room would recognize them.
Absolutely.
We have another question in for Roy. Do you think that hardware manufacturers start being measured by, software financial metrics, and how far off are we from that?
It very much depends on the vertical, right? So and I'm going to put consumer related is really far from my sort of world. But if you're looking at B2B enterprise, devices and hardware products, I think the transition, I'll say for consumer, that will happen maybe probably sooner, but it's just not the world that I'm really focused on. Anything enterprise focused, I think my sort of assumption, my thesis, and that's why we decided to invest in Xyte is yes, everyone will transition. Like I said before, it's not a matter of if, but rather when and how. And I think we touched on how in the sense that it doesn't have to be binary. It doesn't have to be, all at once. In terms of usage and KPIs and measurements, yes, for sure. There are just so many more benefits. And again, we touched on this before, like being able to forecast your revenues, your expenditure, when you're subscription based, when you're as a service, much, much easier.
And I also think, Roy, if I may add, once again, from an investment perspective, it has a huge impact on the valuation of the company. So it's enough to just look, even just like, agriculture companies, the examples I always to give is John Deere, not moving completely to as a service, but opting some premium features on a subscription, and the company, market share and market cap compared to some of their competitors who are still behind and still selling one time. There's a famous graph of, once again, the Tesla valuation compared to, I think, the next 7 or 8 largest automotive manufacturers, only because they offer subscription and additional services and not just selling the cars for a specific margin, but selling other features for higher margins.
That's a great example. In the math and the concept here is very clear, very simple. If you're software, then you're selling at a very high margin, let's say 90, 95%. Your multiple is significantly higher. If you're selling hardware, very tough. The multiples could be 1x, 2x. It's a different world. Everyone is striving towards having these high margins, high multiple businesses.
We're almost out of time, but there's 2 last questions, so we'll get to them quickly. The first one is, can you go a little bit into the technology? How do you integrate with an existing product to serve a task?
Yeah, so I'll just start it in a very, very high level, and I see we keep getting more questions coming in. So very, very shortly, what we believe in Xyte, because every product is different, we actually make our API very easy to use for the device manufacturers. And I always say that they don't need to know how to spell AWS to use Xyte, but we do ask them to connect the devices by developing to our APIs. So once again, every device is different. Every device has different subscription. Every device using a different operation system, but they have cloud RESTful APIs that they can connect to using HTTPS or MQTT. And from there on, they don't need to do anything in the cloud. We host everything for them, and we let them configure everything in a complete no-code environment.
And it's all on your website.
It's all on the website. All of our APIs are available. It's very easy to use, yes.
Another question, how is Xyte helping adopt device or everything as a service business models for small and mid-sized companies?
So that's once again a great question. And Roy, when you and I first discussed, we initially focused actually on small and medium and mid-market customers. And what we saw along the way is that we just naturally went up market and got more traction and more interest for some of the largest enterprises out there. We mentioned a few of them, but we're still working with small and medium. And once again, we made our platform super easy to use. We have 1 or 2 tiers specifically tailored for small and medium so they can afford them as we build more enterprise grade tiers into our product. We still very much value our small and medium enterprise customers because they're the one in many cases very agile in the way they think, and they're just great design partners to what we build. They usually tend to move faster than the large enterprises. So Xyte is definitely a fit for them, and we treat them like we treat any other enterprise when it comes to our support and customer success and making every effort we can to make it as easy as possible for them.
One last quick question that just came in. Where do I start? Is there a use case you'd recommend for getting started?
That's another great question.
While Omer answers, maybe you want to put because I know that there are a bunch of questions, maybe you want to put in the next slide with the contact information so that people can reach us offline whenever they want. Go ahead, Omer.
Yeah, so Rory and I are always available. So the question was, once again, Julie, I'm sorry, the last one?
Is there a use case that you'd recommend as best for getting started?
So we see different companies starting at different angles with Xyte. For some companies, the subscription component is the most important one, and that's where they want to start. This is, by the way, usually the larger companies where they see, I always say they already hired McKinsey to let them know they have to move to subscription. But for most companies, where they start with the completely branded cloud solution for their customers. So the most companies utilize, or the initial step is to utilizing our MDM, mobile device management, or remote monitoring and management platform, completely branded out of the box. They simply connect their devices to our cloud and launch their own branded cloud solution for their customers. And the subscription is usually the next step for them.
Just to make, that's a very important point that I'm not sure everyone understands in sort of layman terms. It means that if I sell a digital signage product through Xyte, my end users can log in, can see their devices on a mobile app or on their laptop, just like you would any sort of consumer product that I have at home, right?
Yeah, so in fact, we just launched a new mobile app earlier this week, but it's funny that you mentioned that. But yes, without getting too much into the detail, and I encourage everybody to reach out. We'll be happy to show you a more detailed demo. But the platform has really two interfaces. One interface is for the device manufacturers to configure, manage, support, control everything, and collaborate with their channel partners and their value chain partners. And the other one is a branded solution for their end customers, for their enterprise, higher education, whatever it is, to log in, claim their subset of devices they purchase from these device manufacturers, and manage those specific devices, subscribe for features with the entire e-commerce experience. So that's a really, once again, as we discussed before, it's a complete value chain solution, but those are the two main interfaces. And I think that's, once again, we don't have time to cover everything, but that's one of the things that makes Xyte truly, truly unique in this industry. As you said at the beginning of the webinar, Roy, there are some industries where they're a complete red ocean. What Xyte does is just such a huge blue ocean for us, and there's so many things we're going to expand into. And even those just two interfaces, I think it's a good example for how we do things very, very differently than what you see out there.
I think that's it for time. I want to thank everyone for joining us today and for all the great questions. And special thanks to Roy and Omer for being with us and having this great discussion. So thanks, everyone. Have a great day wherever you are. And come check us out at xyte.io.
Thank you very
Thank you,
much.
everybody. It was a pleasure. Thank you, Roy.
Thank you.